Hey everybody, it's Brenda from Udacity's Grow with Google Scholarship Program. I'm so excited that you guys can join us live today for the mobile web technical webinar with our own project coach, Ryan Waite. Ryan is live with us from the East Coast, and Ryan's going to be going through your submitted questions. We also have Kelsey here helping us moderate, so if you didn't submit your questions beforehand, you can just put it up in the chat window, and if we have time, we'll get to it. So now I'm going to turn the video over to Ryan. Ryan, if you want, I'm pretty sure everybody knows you from the email, but if you'd like to just take a few minutes and just tell everybody about your background, and that'll get everybody acquainted with you, okay? So here we go.
Hey everyone, I hope everyone can hear me. Just a quick background of me. I started this program called Europe back in 2015. They gave scholarships for Udacity for taking front end, and then ever since then, I was just taking courses up until just recently, and still do take courses from Udacity. So quite experienced, and I'm happy to help everyone that's taking the same journey I took.
Ryan, do you want to take the first question?
Okay, first question. First question I see is, what do you recommend for people trying to get their first tech job to change careers? Having the Google Web, the mobile web specialist certification really make a difference? It definitely helps. It's more things that help than there are that hurt. There's not much you can do to actually hurt your chances, but the biggest thing I would say is networking. And I know it sounds cliche, but it is who you know, and it's about who you have in your network. So if you're able to go to job opportunities and you just reach out to recruiters and you reach out to HR employers themselves, then they will have you in mind. So I'll say the biggest difference is your network. And that's part of why Udacity has their own outreach team, or the careers team, that helps people find jobs when they finish their courses. So I just go down the list, or is there a pause after each question? Or
Yeah, why don't you go down the list? That'd be great.
okay, sure. Next question is, please explain ARIA. Okay, so I assume this student is taking mobile web specialist. ARIA is just like it helps make websites accessible by providing accessibility to elements that don't have it natively. So it helps readers identify what to actually read to people with disabilities, such as blindness or it helps specify what's an application. Like if your website has the Google Maps that visual people can't really interact with, and it has pretty much a set of guidelines of how to make unique elements accessible.
Okay. Next question. And why don't I read you this next question? The next question is, how to best structure object-oriented codes when designing a new project?
That's a good question. So not just object-oriented, but with anything that you build, whether it's a project or a house, if you don't have a blueprint or an outline of how you want it to work, then it's pretty hard to get started. So when you have a concept of what you're building, then you will have some sort of guideline of how you want to build it. So as far as object-oriented code, it's best to design your functions to be as agnostic as possible. And by that, I mean, you can input any object into the arguments of the function and you will still get the intended results out. So whenever functions are what they're called pure or they're agnostic, then it's really the best way to go because it's reusable instead of just coding things to specific um, any specific code that you're writing. The more agnostic it is, the better, in my opinion. And it's been helping me up to this point.
That's really good information. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, next question. Is it a good practice to develop web application for desktop versions and then work for mobile applications? Or should we work for style sheets that fits for both purpose?
And then it says my second question. Okay, I guess you get to that. So to answer the first question, I guess it depends because each website will have a different approach to their design. So some website may just be a branding page. Some websites may be a blog. Some websites may be, different objectives of what they're trying to build. So that kind of dictates the way they're going to style and structure their site. So there are best practices and conventions, but at some point you're going to deviate from typical standards to accommodate what your goals for that website are. So you can have one style sheet that fits each device closely. Little breakpoints are needed, and there are some websites where you're going to need to have multiple style sheets. So I would say the best approach is I would say build desktop first because that's oftentimes where people would use your website. If you're having a website that people use on their phone, then it's pretty much you should just make a mobile app. So I would go desktop first, but it's still fine to go mobile first. It's different paths to the same goal, honestly.
Okay, and this is a two-part question. So the second part of that question is it possible to bring a web application already on run to a web platform without downtime?
I'm not sure what it is they're asking. It says, is it possible to bring a web application already on run to a web? I'm not sure exactly what they're asking, but I see the word platform, so I'm thinking of services like Heroku and Firebase and mobile web service. I'm sorry, Amazon Web Services, excuse me, and various platforms like that. So if you're trying to upload a project to one of these platforms, then oftentimes than not, you don't have to do much work, just a little bit of configurations for that platform to actually run your app, if that answers their question.
Okay. All right, this is another two-part question. So the first part is, hi Ryan, so I learn best through examples. Do you have example websites with service workers and that can show the exact addition of codes to install the service worker? And then the second part is, how can I set my phone up to be able to view the restaurant review project?
So there's a lot of websites on the internet. There's countless. So it's hard to figure out.
Wi-Fi password, please. What is it?
Password 1, 2, 3. Sorry. It's hard to. Sorry, 1 second, please. Sorry, so I don't know of any actual websites with these examples, but my best advice is to always read documentation because that's the people who created it. So they can best explain they can best explain how to use the technology and what works, what are best practices, things of that nature. And as far as the second part, how do I set my phone up to be able to view the restaurants? So the service worker caches the resources as soon as the page loads. So the next time you use it, it's available. And that works through tablets, phones, desktops, whatever device that's actually accessing the website. So if installed correctly, then the cache files will live as long as they're designed to. You can code them to just live for a day or a week or a month or what have you, but that's how you would go for that offline experience first.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. Somebody would like to know where they can get a used Android.
So this is where Android has the upper hand on iPhones and Apple products because there's just a variety of phone manufacturers that run Android OS. So you can go to a convenience store, a wholesale store, gas station, and get a prepaid Android phone. You can go to Amazon or eBay, or a lot of stores have them on the shelves. Even prepaid will suit your needs. You don't really need a phone plan, you just need an Android device. So I think that's where Android has the upper hand.
Good to know. Okay, this is the last of the submitted questions, and then we can go to some questions that came in during the chat. Okay, so this question is, where to start on project 1 after I pulled base code from Git and started the server?
This is for mobile web developers, right? Mobile web.
Yes.
Okay, where to start on project 1? So when I took this not too long ago, the first thing was just making sure the website was accessible. So I went through all of the styling, making sure the color contrast was suitable. I was going through each element, deciding if it needed any area attributes or any accessibility attributes, making sure all links had the title attribute, all images had alternative text. Just pretty much make sure the website was responsive and accessible.
Okay, we're gonna go look at chat questions now. Hold on just a second, Ryan. Okay, here's the question. Here's one of the live questions. How hard is the mobile web certification exam?
I took it not too long ago. I took it April 21st, and I would say the course that Udacity provides covers about 90% of what's actually on the test. So the test works by having a virtual Linux environment, and you have the browser, and you have a code editor, and then you have a set of challenges, and then you have to modify the files to work based on what the challenges are asking. So I would say if you take the mobile web specialist course, then you're in good hands. It's just a few little, I won't say miscellaneous, but just nuances to certain aspects like source sets for images and different attributes that you would use for different scenarios.
And some of the remaining time we have left, Ryan, I thought it would be a good idea, since the student's first project is coming up due June 12th, if we could have your tips on the best way to approach the Restaurant Reviews app stage 1, and any other suggestions that you have to make sure that when a project is submitted, that it's approved.
Right. So the best thing I would say is to follow the rubric, because as a code reviewer, that's what we have to follow when grading every student's projects. So there's no opinion-based way of grading it. We just have to follow the rubric. So I make sure that each of the requirements are met and that the project is in good shape as far as zip file, or if you're using Git, make sure that you're submitting the latest commit, or if you're just submitting a zip file that you're compressing the file and the file size is not too large. So follow the rubric and reach out to your students like you guys always do. Just reach out if you have questions. And it's never a race. I barely ever passed the project the first time. Probably only a few times I've ever done that. So hopefully it helps.
Yeah, I think that's great that you said that. I think that it's important for students to realize that, large percent of the students do not get their project passed on the first try, and that's okay. Like, don't beat yourself up because of it.
I only 2 times, and I didn't expect to the times that I did. So you're not alone. It's a constant process. It's a constant process.
Okay, this live question just came in. Can you give a brief overview of the anatomy of a web application? What are the components that comprise it? Front end, back end, network server, database server, runtime server, etc.
Wow. When I hear all of those things, the first thing I think of is Facebook and Uber and just all of these modern applications because of the demands that are required of these applications. So as far as the front end, as you can imagine, is very JavaScript intensive. And to go into that, it's a lot of AJAX requests to make sure things are happening in real time. There's a lot of scripts that's being imported dynamically. There's a lot of libraries that's incorporated to help manage front end and back end communications. There are a lot of, it's a lot, but nothing compared to the back end. As far as the back end, there's a lot of authentication going on, a lot of database interactions going on. And not only that, but a lot of these users are across the world. So there needs to be servers in a lot of locations around the world to make sure that it's happening fast in real time. So as far as the back end, there's so many ways to structure an application as far as if you want all of the application logic on one server or have one server have each database application and file storage, or it depends. So it's a lot on a broad view, and it's really meticulous to explain everything. It would take days to explain all types of architecture. So with that, just understand that apps that you're using every day, it's a lot more under the hood that you would imagine.
Ryan, I appreciate you tackling that difficult question. All right, here's another live question that just came in. What if you have lots of job responsibilities and don't have a lot of time?
That's a tough question because it's not solely a developer type question, but the job you're working for. A good company wouldn't set themselves in position to fail. And part of failing is asking things for people that would result in them being overextended. So it's oftentimes that you work in a team as a developer. It's very, to my knowledge, it's rare to just work as a single developer in these times, especially with technology advancing pretty rapidly. So there's teams in a lot of companies like back-end team, front-end team, software team, people who specialize in one specific area. So if you find yourself doing a lot at a company, then that's a red flag to me. because it's not really fair to have to be responsible for so much things as far as, mental capacity and just everyday work. Because as the developer, it's a lot of logic that you're thinking about just creating these applications. So, your plate can only be so big and you only have so much on your plate. So don't overextend yourself, in my opinion. If you're walking into work and you think, I really don't want to be here, then that's something you should take note of and you shouldn't let slide.
Wise words, Ryan. Okay, here's another live question that just came in. I noticed the starter project has some strange things, like functions declared without any var let const variable at all. Is there a reason they would declare functions this way?
So I think this is the MWS specialist. So JavaScript is a very unique language as far as how it works and how it's designed. So if you declare a variable without using one of the keyword declarations, then it defaults to creating it in the global scope. So whoever started that code project just did it that way. And if you look in your global scope, which is the window object, you will most likely see the variables there. If you add use strict, then that tells JavaScript to pretty much watch out for certain things. Like, don't allow this to happen. Don't allow for variables to be created without keywords. Don't allow for certain scoping issues and things of that nature. So if you see any code with use strict, then more times than not, you will see that keywords are used. There are a lot of semicolons, and there's a lot of structure in how you write your code. But by nature, JavaScript is referred to loosely typed. So oftentimes you'll see a lot of things that don't really make sense, but still work because JavaScript will do its best to interpret what you're doing. So that's probably why they did it. It's loosely typed and it saves time. With languages like Java, you have to declare the type and it's longer, but it's more secure. So it's a lot of pros and cons to JavaScript.
Ryan, did you hear that, Ryan? Did I accidentally mute myself?
Sorry, I didn't really catch.
Let me read it again. Okay. For MWS Project 1, can we use auto prefixer, post CSS, and Webpack?
If it's a package you use with Gulp, automating tool automation, then yeah, you can. So the only thing I would say that you shouldn't use is any UI library like Angular or React or Vue or Ember. Things to just prepare your code is fine. There's a IDB promise library for easy interaction with the web's API for client-side storage that you've seen in the lessons. So that's accepted. Pretty much any client-side UI library is not allowed. It's just plain vanilla JavaScript. And a lot of the code is already written for you. So it's just a matter of first making it accessible, and then project 2 will go into just using the client-side database, which is IndexedDB, and then the third project will go into just performance, making sure images are loaded quickly, things are loading quickly, and it's offline first.
Ryan, this is really, really helpful. Here's another question. What do you recommend to strengthen my JavaScript skills?
It's cliche, but practice makes perfect, and you just have to do it. And I always use this analogy, you've been walking ever since you learned how to walk, and up to this point, you can do it effortlessly. You can walk backwards, sideways, you can walk and talk, walk and eat. You can walk without thinking about it. So you just have to keep using it to the point it becomes effortless. So
You know it. All right, here's another live question for you. Looking at interview question support books and sites, most of the content has to do with CS stuff that we won't really be using as front-end web engineers for the most part. Is not knowing linked lists and algorithms on whiteboards going to kill our chances during an interview?
Can you repeat that, please? So CS is...
Yeah. Here, I'll read it one more time. Looking at interview questions, support books, and sites, most of the content has to do with CS stuff that we won't really be using as front-end web engineers for the most part. Is not knowing linked lists and algorithms on whiteboards going to kill our chances during an interview?
I wish there was a standard format that every employer would ask, but every employer has different requirements. So I'll start with some similarities and where things start to deviate. So as far as similarities, as a developer, Udacity, that's where Udacity comes in handy because they're actually teaching the core of what you know. And honestly, for every job, you're not really, not just corporate or develop job, any job, you're not really paid on what you're doing, but what you know how to do. So if you think about it, that's the difference between retail and upper level jobs. I know how to write programs because the average person doesn't know. So once you know how to do what it is that they're asking for, you'll realize that certain things is beyond the scope of what they really need. Because at the end of the day, the job description says they need this and that, but if you look at what their role and what their objective is, it doesn't really match. And that applies to me too, because my job, I looked at the job description and it asks for a lot of things that I don't have, but I still have the job because I have the core of what they need. So just focus on the core of what they need and a lot of other things will fall into place. And trust me, I understand the climate of the job industry right now. It's something, but just focus on the core of what they need, not all of the little miscellaneous things that they're asking for. So you won't really, it's good to know, but you don't really need to remember meticulous things, nuances, things like that.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. Okay, next question. If I wanted to make the restaurant reviews application a single page application, am I allowed to write my own router as long as I'm not using a front-end framework or library?
I think so. As long as it fits the rubric, that's what we're like. I'm a code reviewer, so whenever someone submits a project, I just follow the rubric, and if it meets it, then good, go for it. So if it fits the rubric, then I would say go for it. But the thing is, a lot of, well, I can't speak for other reviewers, but from what I've been told from students, a lot of reviewers have their own interpretation of what's fitting a requirement or not. For me, I'm not too strict. If you're demonstrating your knowledge, then that's the main part. But some reviewers are really to the T of the code that was provided, are you using what's provided, and if you're following the rubric. So at some point, a reviewer may take their own approach as what's fitting a requirement. So, and that sucks to hear because you're demonstrating your knowledge, but that's to pretty much guide your way of thinking for when you're on the job. How closely are you doing what is asked instead of doing what you think looks good? Because even in my job now, like I have a lot of ideas that I want to do, but I just have to do what's being asked of me. No matter how much I don't like it, it's just following the instructions I'm given. So it's to help train your mindset in that way too.
Hey, Ryan, wanted to ask you, do you have any guidelines for the students on the best way to utilize their project coaches?
Again, everyone's situation is different. I don't know much of other project coaches. And one hard thing is that Udacity's mentorship platform, it's not real time like Google Hangouts. So I would get a message 30 minutes after a student was sent it. So I wouldn't really know. So the first thing I tell all my students is, hey, Udacity's platform isn't really up to speed. So let's use Google Hangouts where I can see everything instant in real time. And also just understanding what the student needs because every student is different. So helping them help me is what's helped me so far, if that makes sense. So that's doing live videos or just giving them resources and practice on their own and just figuring out what is they need and how I can help with that.
Yeah, and let me tell you again, your time here today has been so valuable. Thank you. Okay, we have another live question, and it goes like this. In recent interviews, I didn't get much linked list questions, but as long as I was willing to learn and ask questions, it felt like they were willing to work with me. I guess it's not more of a question as opposed to kind of like a comment.
Yeah, just to touch on that a little, it's a little weird sometimes because if you don't have a question, then you don't have a question. And I'm not sure why it's seen as you're not interested or not. It's a lot of things that are conventional that I feel like it's due for a change. But it's weird, honestly. We just associate certain things with certain meanings. If you ask a question, it automatically means you're interested. Like I have meetings at work and I ask questions not because like I just want them to think I'm engaged sometimes, and that's being honest. So do understand like certain conventions and how to use it to your advantage. So if you don't really have a question, just make a comment or something. Hey, I really like this, or I think this is cool, and yeah, just keep that in mind.
That's good advice because showing interest, even if you're not getting questions in an interview, is really important, showing that you want the job. Okay, here's a question for you. It's my question actually, is I know a lot of students, we have a lot of other responsibilities. We have family life, we have work. What are your recommendations for number one, fitting your nano-degree program into your life? And number two, what are your tips for kind of staying motivated and focused? Because it's 6 months,
Everyone works different in addition to having their own unique situation. So again, at some point it's going to deviate from students, but there are some common similarities that formulate to a successful journey. So for me, learning time management is the key because once you lay things out, you don't really have to guess what you should be doing, or you won't really have to worry about having stray free time or just being over encumbered with one task. And I decided to follow the model used in like public schools, where back in high school you would have a class for 45 minutes, and the key is to not go over the allocated time. If you didn't finish in time, then that's it. You come back to class the next day. So I follow that same tactic with a lot of other things, where I'm going to dedicate this much time to this learning, dedicate this much time to friends, this much time to obligations that you have. And the key is to not go over the allocated time. And as far as staying motivated, it's for me, it's just remembering why I started in the first place. It's oftentimes you may forget why you started in the first time. I'm sorry, where you started in the first place, because you're so caught up in what you're doing. But if you just take time to step back and just remember why you started in the first place, then that will reveal just how much you're passionate about what you're doing.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you. Okay, here's a question about questions. As a mentor, and I'm sure you receive lots of questions, and we've been hearing time and time again that how the importance of asking a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Asking a good question will get you the right answer. Can you kind of walk us through the elements of a good question in your mind as a mentor? Or how students can ask a good question?
So there are two different types of questions. There's what are called open-ended question and closed-ended. So closed-ended question is thing that's either yes or no, like a Boolean. So is it hard? Yes. To answer your question, you can opine on it, but just that one word can answer your question. So open-ended questions are things that require you to think about the answer, and it's not just either yes or no. So for example, what technology stack would you recommend for a single page app? That's an open-ended, because I can't just say yes or no. So if you ask open-ended questions that require thought to answer, then that's good indication of being a good question. And there are good closed-ended questions, but it's not perceived as easy as closed-ended. So.
I don't think we have any more live questions. Ryan, do you have any other suggestions or tips to offer these mobile web specialist students?
Yeah, so first tip I would say is it's pretty much a process. So it's okay when you don't get something right away. It's okay if something's not working. I step away from code plenty of times. It gets to the point where you're just out of it and things aren't working and you just need to step away. So it's not bad to step away and just clear your mind. So never put yourself in overdrive or overkill just to get something to work. And oftentimes you come back, it's easy to see what you were struggling with. So do be fair to yourself, because learning something new is not easy, especially programming, because it's a very taxing field on your mind. So just understand that it's a process, learning something, and you just have to keep doing it until you're better. So just be fair to yourself each step of the way of learning. And another tip is to read documentation. And I never realized just how much reading went into programming, but oftentimes you're using frameworks, you're using libraries, and you have to read documentation to figure out how it works and how to use it the way you want to use it. So reading helps in just exhausting all your resources, like your peers, Slack, the internet, books, and any resources that's available to you. Going to code meetups and groups and having study buddies and study sessions, anything to help you learn. And understanding how you learn will help guide you towards what resources you would need. So that's about it for now.
Good tips, good tips. All right, Ryan, we had 3 live questions come in. Let's go through those. The first one is, what conferences do you go to learn and grow as a developer?
I personally never went to any coding conferences or like meetups or things of that nature because I think I was not a special case, but one of those cases where you like it so much that you get lost in doing it. I had my moments where I forgot to eat, I forgot to sleep because I was just in it. So I personally never went to it. I prefer to read it because I can take my time digesting the information that I'm looking at and actually applying it. Whereas a video, you have to pause, stop, and just keep coming back, rewinding. But reading, you can just pinpoint each concept that you want to learn and apply. So I'm more of a reader and practicer.
Every video but this video, Ryan. All right, second question. How do you assess your current skill level?
As a web developer, mobile developer, front end, back end in general, or
Mobile web.
as a mobile, like iPhone apps or Android apps or mobile web, or
Mobile web.
I would say 6 out of 10. And I say that because there's an entire world to every little concept. Service worker in itself, it's a massive concept to take in. And caching and just pretty much everything, every little aspect of mobile web is a big concept in itself. And I say that because it's always changing. Like I can never be a true master of something because the next day, oh, this is deprecated. This is the new preferred way. Like, oh, okay, now I have to learn how this works. And then 2 weeks later, this is deprecated. Now we're using this. Like, okay, now I have to learn this. Like, it's just constant learning. So I don't think you can truly ever master a specific technology as far as programming. So I would say a good 6 out of 10 right now.
Is there anything that you do in particular to make sure that your skill level is kept up to date with all the deprecation?
At this point, there's a trick to working as a developer, and it's understanding the foundation of programming in general and how things are related. So I don't really need to stay up to date on technology because I learned the core, right? Like once you understand the core, you understand everything else because everything else is just aspects of the core. So as long as you understand like the foundation of something, then you will understand anything that comes out because it's based on that foundation. Like I can stay away from mobile web for about a year or two and come back as if I've been coding every day because the foundation hasn't changed. So understanding how to apply what you've learned, and there's a trick to learning. Like learning is a skill in itself. Being able to read something and apply what it is that you're reading and taking in is a skill in itself. So as long as you know how to take something and actually apply it, then you'll be in good shape. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Some good points made there. Okay, another live question. I see Google is now using mobile first indexing. Does that mean mobile web specialist is the future in terms of job availability?
Mobile indexing. So I don't think that takes away because when a new technology comes out, it takes time for it to be accommodated into modern standards. Facebook is still using PHP. Right now there's Node.js, there's Python, but there are still a lot of websites using PHP because of the length of how long you've been um, using something. So if you start building a house, you can change it if you only built just the layout or the foundation. But once you get to the roof and you want to start over, it's like the house is already built. A lot of websites are already established with specific technology. So there will always be a need for certain things. So it's going to take time for certain things to phase out. Like it takes time to migrate from one technology stack to another. So as of now, um, you're still good learning what Google's been using before mobile indexing. So it'll take about a good year at least to even get started. As given Google's code base and how much products and services they have, and to just migrate from one thing to the next, it's gonna take time. So.
All right, Ryan, this question just came in. You mentioned recruiters and making connections. Outside of LinkedIn, are there other recommendations on how to use technology and services to maximize our exposure on the market?
Yeah, so when I was looking for jobs, I use every job platform there was. There's Career Builders, there's Indeed, there's Monster, there's ZipRecruiter, um, there's various job platforms. And on those job platforms, you'll notice a lot of similar recruiter companies like Apex Systems, Robert Half, Booz Allen, Hamilton. There's countless recruiters. So the more you expose yourself, I put my resume on all of them. So I was getting emails on a daily basis. So the more you're seen, the more likely it is that you will be contacted.
Great advice. If there's any other questions, no more questions, Ryan, give any parting words for the mobile web specialist students?
I do. For one, never quit, and no matter how hard it gets, and it gets hard sometimes, but don't quit, especially when you've come this far and you have a reason to finish. You never know what skill you're going to need in life. So the more knowledge you have, the better you can use it to your advantage. So just keep sticking through all of the hard times and just understand that it's a process. I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's true. Just be fair to yourself, never quit, and just keep striving. Because if not you, then who? You have what it takes. You just have to do it.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, guys, this ends today's Mobile Web Specialist live technical webinar with Ryan. Ryan, thank you again for your time and sharing your knowledge and your words of motivation with all the students here today. We will see you around the Slack chat channel. If you guys need Ryan's help, just mention him or DM him. All right. Thanks, Ryan. Have a great day.
Sure. Take care.
Take care. We'll see you around. Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody, for joining today.